Hello and welcome. My name is Patrick Hastings. I am the, recently arrived CEO for the Australian New Zealand Biochar Industry Group. And today's focus, more than anything else, is really about recognising where biochar and ANZBIG is now in the system. What we've seen over a course of some time is a shift. We're shifting from a really good and really interesting idea, which was biochar, into a space where we are fast becoming a scale-up industry. As we start to move towards becoming a scale-up industry, the role of ANZBIG in representing the member, its sectors, and the interrelationships needs to shift with it. So today is really about sharing with you where I see ANZBIG's role sitting over the course of the next few years, and giving you a headspace of what we're focused on and why we're focused on it, and how we're trying to enable this sector to become a massive industry across Australia. So when we start to think about what it is and where we're at, what we really are is shifting from a startup to a scale-up industry. And as we start to shift from a startup to a scale-up industry, us as your industry body need to shift the way we focus and shift the conversations and shift the way in which we're engaging to make sure that we're creating the space for that to occur. What we are focused on is systems readiness, not promotion, not projects, not products. Biochar activity is accelerating, but the systems that determine its activity are not allowing it to become a durable, investable piece. It's fragmenting and creating risk and inconsistency, which in the short term is going to be felt most significantly. ANZBIG's role is to focus on the foundations, the standards, integrity, and policy alignment so that scale can happen safely and credibly across Australia and New Zealand. The purpose of today is not alignment on enthusiasm or outcomes. I think that's already there, but alignment on how the system needs to work if biochar is to scale responsibly. We're stepping back from individual projects and starting to look at the system as a whole. Where it's strong, where the system is strong, where it's incomplete, and what must come first to allow this sector to really thrive. What we're seeing across the marketplace right now is that actually activity and interest is accelerating, but the system frameworks that allow us to accelerate aren't keeping pace. And what we're seeing is really a risk gap being created. That risk gap is already being felt. It's being felt in friction when we try to get projects up, frustration when things don't seem to fall into place the way they need to. And finally, we're seeing it in the way in which, in the cost of doing business and the cost of regulating, and how we can actually deliver. The cost of doing business is absolutely showing up. At the moment, it's silent or silently, mainly because we are still in scale up, so we don't have as many projects. But that noise will get louder and louder if we don't start to make sure that the system is supporting us and supporting the two countries to really invest in this space. So when we start talking about what it is we're focused on, when I talk about setting the system, really it's about an alignment. Right now, alignment will enable confidence. Confidence will allow for consistent regulatory interpretation. It'll allow us to understand exactly what biochar is within the sector. It will allow for predictable compliance, and it will allow for investment into the sector. Fragmentation is what the system looks like when we're all acting in good faith, but without shared reference points. It's really common at this particular point in time in an industry cycle, in a sector's startup cycle, for that to be the case. What we actually need to do is create that confidence. And today's presentation talks about what the key steps are that ANZBIG needs to take in support of making sure that that is there. So what does systems readiness mean? So it means there's clarity, there's auditability, which will equal investability. In the case of our sector and where we're heading, readiness is going to precede scale. Readiness is going to precede scale because ultimately there is still a lot of confusion over what it is and what biochar is and where it sits in the ecosystem. There's confusion about how and what needs to happen within the broader regulatory framework and within the sector in terms of how we actually scale up. So when there isn't clarity, i.e. what are the claims and can they be understood by the regulator and by the investor? And can we test and verify that those outcomes are true and correct? What we start to see is shifts in both regulatory behaviour and investor behaviour where the risk profile increases. If we start to reduce that risk profile, then ultimately investment will flow. What this slide aims to do is show you exactly what I mean when I talk about the structural logic, when I talk about the system. Investability of the sector rests on two pillars. It rests on standards, so understanding what the baseline and considerations are. And it rests on data integrity, making sure that the claims are credible and measurable. From an industry perspective, what this actually means is that discipline right now will improve our long-term viability and accelerate our ability to scale. So what is ANZBIG's role in this newly forming or newly shaping space? The way I see ANZBIG's role is that we are a neutral partner in systems building. We need to sit in the pre-competitive space and look at systems infrastructure. We need to act as a single coordinated technical interface. And we need to make sure that integrity issues are addressed once, not project by project. The aim of ANZBIG in this stage of the sector's life cycle is to reduce friction and create a space where we can have sensible conversations that move the sector forward rapidly. Our aim is to reduce the load on regulators and on the industry so that we reduce risk across the systems. So what does that actually look like? So ultimately what we're trying to create is a governable sector, a sector that fits inside the system, but actually the system also fits to reflect what biochar and carbon dioxide removal actually are. So from our perspective, there are three pillars that ANZBIG needs to focus on. The first is standards and certification. What is the technical truth of what we're doing and how we do it? Second is policy sequencing, creating coherent regulatory pathways that allow us to reduce friction and cost, both for the regulator and government, but also for industry. And then finally, making sure there is carbon integrity, making sure that we are creating assessment pathways that allow us to effectively respond to the great pressures that are building both nationally in New Zealand and internationally. I should also point out that what happens with these pillars is if one moves forward faster than the others, then they actually destabilize each other, which is why those three pillars are the core ones that allow us to actually build trust across the industry. So from an ANZBIG perspective, we've created some boundaries and focus in what we're doing. We've done this to make sure that we stay true to the long-term strategic direction of ANZBIG, that roadmap that so many of you contributed to over so much time. But making sure that those three pillars set the system that allow us to flourish and bring that roadmap to the forefront. So phase one is about systems foundations. As I've already said, we're going to focus on standards and policy, in integrity frameworks and technical coordination. What we will not be focusing on is project promotion and market intermediation. That doesn't mean that that's not part of a future phase for ANZBIG, but right now, ANZBIG needs to sit in a neutral space to allow for all of the actors in the system to come together in a safe place to solve the problems we need to solve. Pillar one, the standard and certification, we have a very key focus, which is bringing to life the Australian Standard 5541 as a recognised technical baseline for the industry. The focus of this is to make sure that we have verified product characteristics to underpin credible claims. The reason why this is so important is that we need to allow claims to be assessed consistently to give regulators confidence in the product and that they're working from the same shared technical references. It's been a very interesting conversation so far as we start to work through and build out the Australian standard, as we work with the regulators to understand exactly what the questions are and where they'd like to head. Encouragingly, everybody in the working group is very positive towards bringing this standard to light, and we look forward to bringing that to public consultation in the next few months. The second pillar, which is policy sequencing, is building on ANZBIG's decoupling policy in 2025, which is really understanding or recognising that the regulatory framework was set up in a space of waste. So it was set up to respond to the concept of waste, not to the concept of waste as a resource. So as we start to work with all of the state and territory governments, federal government and New Zealand government, as we to look at what does circular carbon systems actually look like? How do we separate out the original thinking to allow for new thinking to come through? This is going to be a very interesting process because, as everyone is aware, there's many challenges across multiple regulatory spaces. But we look forward to working with our members and working with industry, and working with government to build out a shared understanding of how we enable circular carbon systems to come to life. Finally, the third pillar is carbon market readiness. This is about creating assessment pathways, not entitlement. We're really focused on making sure that the methodology enables measurement and provides confidence that that measurement provides confidence that is actually investable. We are focused on making sure that this is not a guarantee or entitlement, but rather measurement and verification. The main distinction of that is really about integrity, and integrity will underpin both regulator confidence and investability. So what does all of this actually mean for government and regulators? What we're focused on for government and regulators is reducing risk. We don't want to see greenwashing, and we want to make sure that there is safety in the system. We want to make sure that there is safety in approving this sector to move forward. We also want to create efficiency We're going to be focused on sequenced engagement, making sure that we're responding to the needs and supporting the pressures the regulator is under, so that we are effectively marching forward, not at a lightning pace, but at a pace that is both safe and recognisable for industry and regulators. For industry, we're focused on creating clearer signals. We want to reduce the friction and challenge that exists currently in the system, so that projects can attract capital easily. They can move through regulation without uncertainty, so that we're reducing those few yes but conversations and allowing us to actually scale. From a managing system risk perspective, what we're not about is creating hype. We want to reduce fragmentation, and we do not want poor quality in the system. We want to make sure there is claims discipline. We want to see coordination across the sector and across all of the players in the sector. And we want to make sure that there are measurable baselines, so that we're all talking the same language and moving forward with confidence around the system to see biochar, carbon dioxide removal as a supporting and enabling economic contributor. So where are we heading? So for right now, we're focused on standards development. Standards development focuses on two areas, the AS 5541, but also on making sure that we see an ACCU methodology moving forward. The next is about making sure that the policy positions are really from policy positions across the different jurisdictions are really aligning, so that we're seeing both the recognition of carbon circularity, but also a reduced friction for organisations working across multiple sectors, multiple jurisdictions. And then finally, making sure that we've created a system and created the space for maturity and scale to occur. In effect, what we're looking to do in this phase of ANZBIG's existence is partner for a governable sector. We want to be deliberate about the way in which we engage. We want to be sequenced in the way in which we move things forward. We want to make sure that this sector and the regulation that sits around it is credible. And then finally, if all of those come together, the sector is investable by design. This is about a very deliberate approach for making sure that the biochar sector emerges not by accident, but rather not by accident or enthusiasm, but rather by deliberate design. Our role as ANZBIG is to be the partner that builds the system. It's about being that neutral place that allows our members, allows the broader industry and government to come together safely to move forward. My ask and my call out to all of the members on this call is very simple. Lean into ANZBIG. Work with us to make sure that this sector thrives in Australia. The way you can do that is by engaging with what we have to offer, reaching out to myself and to our board members to have those conversations about where the challenges lie and what you would like to where you would like to see things shift. But more importantly, by bringing your network into ANZBIG to make sure that we are all having the same conversation. Biochar is very unique in the fact that it touches multiple sectors. This isn't about its soil use, it isn't about its industrial use. Biochar sitting across, biochar being a sector and supporting all of those sectors, both in their carbon reduction and their broader positioning in the Australian economy. So bring your network, make sure that we are all having the same conversation, that we are calling for the same things, and let ANZBIG be your mouthpiece, and ANZBIG be the place where you come to work together. There is a Q&A I'm going to pause there and answer any questions that might come through in the questions and answers. If you can't find the Q&A, you'll see a little quadrant of dots, and you should be able to click on that. It says meeting tools, and it should bring up the Q&A for you. And if you're on one of the other versions of Google Meets, it will be down the bottom, along the bottom. I'm going to take silence as golden. Can I get an emoji to make sure that I haven't been speaking to myself for 25 minutes? Oh, thank you, Damien. Much appreciated. Yeah, g'day, Roy. If you can come off mute, please ask the question. Otherwise, I'll ask you to drop it in the Q&A. How open are you to the approaches used by other entities in the EU, for example? So one of the key things I've been doing quite a bit of work on at the moment is looking at global jurisdictions and the movement of not just biochar, but carbon dioxide removal more broadly. Australia is sort of sitting in a place where it can accelerate into that, but it will struggle to, at this point in time, will struggle to keep up with some of the changes. So, Marshall, from my perspective, we should be learning what we can from how different organisations or other peak bodies have responded to the challenges in other jurisdictions. And where translatable, we should be working to translate that. And a lot of the work I've been doing in the background is looking at how those things have moved through. I hope that answers your question. Anonymous, what is the annual biochar production in Australia? It's a really good question. We actually have a survey that will be going out soon. The short answer is that question is a difficult one to answer. Because right now, where biochar sits is on a shape in a forming space. So we are seeing some challenges in collecting accurate industry data. So one of the core focuses for ANZBIG will be to make sure that we become that centre of data integrity from an industry perspective. So I will be sending out a survey. I will ask, when you receive that survey, please respond to it. Your data is safe. It will be anonymised. It will be aggregated. Your information will not be shared. But there will be more to come from ANZBIG on that in the coming month or two. The standard, so at this point in time, the standard is under development, right? I am not able to talk to the content of the standard until it comes out to public consultation. At that point, we can talk in more depth over what the standard contains and where the measurement pieces come from. Unfortunately, that's just part of the agreement with Standard Australia. So I'm more than happy to have, and I will be having several conversations and webinars over the course of the public consultation process, where we will be able to have that conversation in more depth in partnership with some of our technical experts who have been helping draft the standard. Thank you very much, Marshall. I would welcome the conversation and I will reach out. How do I know we're not in startup phase? I think we still are in startup phase. I think we're at the cusp of starting to shift into scale up. And when we look at what's happening internationally and we look at where investment is starting to line up, as well as where government policy is lining up, this is what's going to make sure that we can shift from startup to scale up, which is why we're focused in creating the system. It's less about where our production rate currently is and rather about making sure that the system itself allows for us to shift from startup to scale up. So from a standard perspective, our expected timeline for the standards. So we are looking at public consultation in a number of months. So it is reasonably imminent. We have been through the first drafting cycle and just going through the second drafting cycle at the moment, and we are targeting the next few months to come to public consultation. I cannot give you an exact date at this point in time, but there will be more to come on that soon. Michael, 2 board members currently sit on the Australian Standards Committee. Yep, thank you very much for that piece, and I look forward to speaking with them in more detail around the approach of around our approach with Standards Australia. And thank you very so. It's an interesting one. This there is no need for a standard for an industry that has not started. There might not be any need for a standard today, like immediately, but standards take time to develop and they take time to be adopted. And as this industry scales, and there is going to be growing pressure for carbon dioxide removal, as well as for alternates to multiple other products, this industry has an opportunity to scale rapidly. And for it to scale rapidly, we need to make sure that the right systems and processes are in place for it to be a governable sector, and to provide confidence both to the regulators and to investors that the industry can do so safely. So this is about the standard, and development of the standard is about making sure that we are ready for the next phase of development. Have you thought about planning an adoption of innovation approach, which is science-based? Not in detail, Marshall, but I'm more than happy to have that conversation with you outside of this. What is the latest update for the Biochar ACCU scheme method and approval of its method? Great question, thanks, Peter. So where we're at with the ACCU methodology, so in about 18 months ago, just over 18 months ago, ANZBIG put in an expression of interest for an ACCU methodology. The feedback from the Emission Reduction Advisory Council, a committee, was that it supported the ACCU methodology. It had some reservations around timing and sequence, as well as resourcing from a government perspective. In the last few weeks, I have been meeting with a technical working group that's been looking specifically at the ACCU methodology, and I am starting to engage government about how we can partner with them to move the ACCU methodology forward. And move it forward in a way that is both responding to the timing considerations that were raised by Iraq, as well as allowing us to make sure that we are actually building out the ACCU scheme. I'll be providing more information on that in coming webinars, but suffice to say that I've been on board for 6 weeks now, and we are focused on it as per my commitments earlier in the presentation, and happy to provide more information at a future webinar, which will be focused more clearly on that. For the person who is posting under anonymous, I am more than happy for you to reach out outside of this. I cannot respond to all of this as it's not really the focus of this presentation, but I'm more than happy to have a conversation outside of this, and I'm more than happy to set up a public forum to have a broader conversation. Yeah, thank you, Michael. It is true, Standards Australia do have a very strong voice, and they do listen to their recommendations. which is also a really important reason why we are partnered with them. Looking for any further comments or questions, I'm more than happy to respond to. I apologise for the brevity and some of the challenges that were experienced over this presentation, particularly with it being run twice. I'm more than happy to catch up and would encourage everybody on this call to reach out and have a conversation with me. I would welcome all views and any challenges to the direction of ANZBIG. But the key call out as we start to move forward is please lean in, work with me to make sure that we move this sector forward and we accelerate the opportunity that this sector creates, both for Australia and New Zealand, but also more broadly.